It's November 5th, 2021, beautiful city of the Villages in Florida. My name is Jong-woo Han. I am the president of Korean War Legacy Foundation, which has more than 1,500 interviews of Korean War veterans, not just from the United States, but also from all other 21 countries that participate in the Korean War. We are doing this to commemorate the special occasion of the breakout of the Korean War in 1950. That's the 70th anniversary, supported by the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs of Republic of Korea, MPVA. The goal is to preserve your memory because it's been a long time also, and also honor your service. But most importantly, we want to educate our children and even our history teachers with this interview, the oral history, the direct witness of the Korean War veterans who were there actually fought for the Korea, so that they can use this interview in the classroom when they talk about the Korean War in the context of the Cold War, right? That's why we are doing this. It's my great pleasure to meet you, sir, in this morning, and you came with your wife, Deb. So I will ask her to join this interview later if she agrees, okay? Please introduce yourself. What is your name and spell it for the audience, please?
Name is Ed Donahue, Donahue.
Mm-hmm. What is your birthday?
8/7/34.
You are young.
I was.
Yeah. So you are 87?
Yes.
Very good. And where were you born?
In Philadelphia,
Philadelphia.
Pennsylvania.
Very good city. I love it there. And tell me about your family background when you were growing up, your parents and your siblings.
Well, I'm the oldest of 6 children.
Cool.
My dad worked at the Navy Yard, and my mom worked in a ribbon mill.
Navy Yard.
Yeah, Philadelphia Navy Yard.
Uh-huh. And your mom working on...
She worked in a ribbon mill.
Ribbon mill?
Yeah, where they just made ribbons.
Uh-huh. That's very interesting. So 34, it was 5 years after the Great Depression in 1929.
Yes.
Did that actually affect your childhood? Did you feel it?
No, we really didn't. I mean, yeah, there were times that we were a little hungry, but we never went day after day, or I don't ever remember having to scrounge for a meal.
Mm. So you were fortunate?
Yep.
Because many of the Korean War veterans that I did interview, they were really, really affected by the Great Depression. So, very good.
Oh, we had times where I had to go out and remove signs from flagpoles because they were going to put the house up for sale. So there were tough times, but I was too young to understand what was going on.
Right, that's right. So tell me, what high school did you graduate and when?
Okay, I graduated from a seminary.
Seminary?
Yeah.
You mean the high school?
Yeah, it was a high school seminary.
What's the name of it?
St. Charles Borromeo.
St. Charles?
Borromeo.
Could you spell it?
B-O-R-O-M-O.
Again, please.
B-O-R-O-M-O.
O-M-O.
Borromeo.
When did you graduate?
I would have graduated in 1950.
So that's the year that Korean War broke out, right?
Right, but it happened after I got out of school.
After?
Mm-hmm. I got out of school in May.
Right, so...
It started in June.
Yeah. Okay, so what do they teach? It's a seminary.
Well, religion for one thing.
Uh-huh.
And then the normal high school subjects with an emphasis on religion.
Got it. Obviously, it's a Christian.
Yes.
Yep. So you learn geography, history, things like that, right?
Yes.
And did you learn anything about Korea at the time?
At that time, didn't even know where it was.
Not even from the map?
Oh, I mean, they would point them out, but
Did they
It wasn't
point
something, I had never heard of a Korean conflict where I had heard about Okinawa and Iwo Jima, and I had heard about most of the islands, but I hadn't heard about Korea as a particular hotspot.
So you learn about World War II, Iwo Jima battles, so on.
Well,
but-
they were in the paper. It wasn't
Right.
that they were teaching us in school. It
Uh-huh.
was just, I mean, you got geography and you heard about certain peninsulas, but Korea had never been brought up as a major peninsula to us at the time.
Did you learn anything about Japan and China?
Well, yes, but all the negative things you always heard. You know, the usual propaganda that we would get during the war. And of course, you know, as kids, we sucked it all up, believed everything we were told.
So after graduation, what did you do?
I went right in the Marine Corps.
Enlisted.
Yes.
Why Marine Corps?
Well, my father, when he worked at the Navy Yard, used to bring home sailors and Marines from the ships who were home and out of, you know, away from home. And since he had been turned down because he had too many children, and so that's why he stayed at the Navy Yard. And they said he had a position of responsibility that they didn't want to vacate. So
Wow.
he tried every branch of the service, and they all turned him
So
down.
your father wanted to enlist himself
Oh, yeah.
for Marine.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh, he
so-
wanted to enlist in the Navy because he worked at the Navy Yard and he knew a lot more sailors than he did Marines.
what did he do actually in the...
He started off as I don't know how he finished up, but he started off as what they called a pipe fitter. He used to work down in the bows of the ship, welding pipes together and so on.
Ed, are you aware of the vocabulary, I mean the word Kilroy?
Oh, sure, Kilroy was here?
Yeah. How do you know about that?
Well, because in the Second World War, it was all over Europe.
Exactly.
You didn't find as much in the islands, but you found it all over Europe. And it would be in the papers all the time.
All the time. And actually that Kilroy started in the dockyard in Massachusetts.
Right.
Yeah. And so your father must be very familiar with that, right, Kilroy?
Oh, sure.
It was a kind of signature that your job was well done, you know? Huh.
Well, then after that, some of the fellows you used to bring home, I met one guy from Massachusetts, he was, and his nickname was Spud. That's all I remember him by. He had been in the Marines, and he had been at Okinawa, and he had been in Iwo Jima, and he was brought home, and I was talking to him, and I was so impressed with him that when my chance came, I went right into the Marine Corps.
But I want to ask you again, not just because your father wanted to enlist himself for Marine, but why Marine among Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard? Why?
I never thought, only because I had met this Spud, and he impressed me. He just impressed me with his manner and the way he carried himself, and I never thought of another branch of the service.
Semper Fi, right?
Semper Fi all the way.
Yeah, all the way. So, when was it when you enlisted?
In June of 1950.
Did you know Korean War broke out when you enlisted?
Yeah, it started to be, it was in the paper that
So you brought yourself into the war by yourself.
I was too young to know better.
Okay.
I just decided that was what I was going to do.
So you were ready to go to war,
Yep.
and you could die.
I never thought of it, not at that age, I never thought about it. You know, we're all brave till that first shot is fired at us.
So where did you go to for boot camp?
Paris Island.
Paris Island. Tell me about it. How was it? I have a lot of interviews with the Marine who had the boot camp in Paris Island, so I know what it's like. But children doesn't know. Tell me the detail.
Oh, okay. It was very different. You're coming from a life of protection in many ways in comparison to what you get when you go into boot camp. When you get off that bus, from that moment on, you know your life has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And I had we used to call it a duck's ass at that time. It was the way you combed your hair back and parted it.
Yeah.
And big pompadour. The first thing they did was shave my head.
Absolutely, right?
And that's when I realized, well, things are going to be a little different than what they had been. So, because I had been raised in a really kind of tough neighborhood in South Philadelphia. So that I was used to, but I wasn't used to the strict training we were going to be getting.
Give me an example. Hardship, difficult.
Well, little things like the very first night, we were awakened at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
We hadn't even gotten to the camp yet.
Yeah.
We were in a holding ground till the next morning when the buses showed up. And they had us get out of bed because somebody, they said, had spilled something on the floor. We all scrubbed the floor down, all of us with toothbrushes. That was my first night.
But there was nothing.
That was my first night in the Marine Corps.
But there was nothing for everything that you went through there. For how many? 12 weeks?
No, what was supposed to be 12 weeks, but because the Korean War had broken out and they were in need of troops,
I see.
they cut our time down dramatically. Mm-hmm. So got out of there in beginning of September, so they cut us back to about little over 8 weeks. So in 2 months' time, I went from running around with my buddies and dating and everything to being a full-fledged Marine. Mm-hmm. And then I went to advanced rifle training at Camp Pendleton in California.
Yeah. What kind of training was that? Advanced rifle?
Well, that was a little different. We had what they called winter training, where they sent us up to a place called Pickle Meadows. And that was a training ground for winter weather. And they sent us to advanced infantry, where we spent a lot of time on the rifle range. Mm. And then they shipped us out.
Were you good at it?
I was an expert in the rifle range.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's one of the reasons. You can put in for anything you want. I thought I wanted to be in tanks. I don't know why. I just thought that would be interesting. That would be fun.
So where did you depart from? San Diego or San Francisco?
Oh, no, we left out of San Diego.
San Diego. When? Remember?
Beginning, I should say, near the end of October.
Okay. To where? Directly to Korea, or?
No, we
did
went
you
to
go through
Japan first.
Yep.
And then, it was just, the whole thing was just a mystery to me. And then they put us on a transport and took us into Korea.
Where did you land? Busan?
And Korea, yes, Busan. We originally landed in Japan at Kobe.
Kobe, and then Busan. But do you remember the date that you arrived there in Busan?
No, I remember the date that I finally got to meet my new roommates. Mm-hmm. And that was in November.
But was it in Busan or?
Oh, no. There were a few of us that were replacements for men who had already been wounded or gone home or whatever. And they moved us on up to...
Where?
Well, I wound up at Udamni.
Udamni? Mm-hmm. Whoa, so you are chosen few.
Yes.
There you go. Let's talk about it. Udamni, when was it? When did you arrive there in Udamni?
At the 21st of November. Well, I didn't land. I joined my group short of there. And we moved up to Udamni on the 23rd because we were given a Thanksgiving dinner. That I will remember, my first Thanksgiving.
So November 23rd at Udamni.
Yes,
Okay. And Thanksgiving.
that was Thanksgiving.
What did you eat?
Well, it was supposed to be cooked turkey, and they were supposed to be bringing us warm food. By the time we got it,
Everything frozen.
everything was as cold as it could be. But we had been told we would be home by Christmas.
Yep.
So we were still pumped up. We were still all in a good mood. And so then they told me and three of the other squad members that we were going to be on a forward observation. And that was the night of the 26th that they were going to send us up there. And they decided from rumors that they heard. Now remember, I'm just a grunt. I don't, nobody's reporting to me, and I'm just doing what I'm told. And then they came back and told us, no, we're going to hold you back for a day or two, and then we'll send you up to forward observation. But then on the night of the 27th, and we couldn't really dig in because the ground was so solid. And we had a little bit of a snowstorm. But strange as it seems, we were singing I'll Be Home for Christmas, and we really thought that was, we were shortly going to be shipped out. And then for me personally, the only thing I heard was the sound of the bugles. That was the first thing I can remember. Then the screaming. And that was coming from outside. First one I saw, the first Chinese, and I know it was Chinese, not Korean. It wasn't part of the
How can you possibly discern between?
Because they were wearing all white uniforms. They were dressed to take over the location. It turned out, I didn't know that at the time, it was their dress uniform. And then that's the way it was for the next couple of weeks.
So please go ahead.
Well,
The night of 27, and you begin to hear the
it
bugles.
was early in the morning, as I recall. It was kind of like early in the morning. When I don't mean daylight, I mean like it was 2 o'clock
like
in the
the
morning.
dawn.
Right.
27, right?
No,
28?
that's a 20. We first heard they came across on the 20th, but I don't remember them being there until they awakened me out of what I thought was a sound sleep, and I was cold. I was bundled up in my parka and everything else I could get. And then I heard these bugles, and all of a sudden this screaming. Mm-hmm. I just heard loud noises. I realized they were bugles later. But then they were all around. I mean, they were everywhere. And my top sergeant, who I lost almost that same night, he just told us, just keep firing, just keep shooting. And they were, as long as you stayed in your little group, you knew everybody else outside, you just fired at them. That was it. And you just kept it up until dawn, and then they were gone. Mm-hmm. And then they came and told us we were going to be, after 2 days of that, 3 days really, they told us we were going to be pulling back, trying to go back to Coterie. Actually, we were going to try to go back and relieve the Marines that were back at Coterie.
Coterie. So, you had the first encounter in the dawn of 28th, and then you stayed there until 31st. But during this 28th and 31st, were there any other engage with?
Oh yeah, every night,
all the time.
Once the sun went down, they were there again. A strange thing was, and some of the strange things you remember, is sometimes they would come at you and they wouldn't. Some would have rifles and some would not. And the ones behind the ones in front, when they fell, the ones behind them would pick up their rifles and keep coming. There was no let up. It just kept coming.
What were you thinking Did you think that you could survive while being killed? What were you thinking?
That's 71 years ago. And it's tough for me to remember. Of course, at different times you think you're going to get killed. You just can't figure out what to do. We had a lot of Marines with me in my outfits all the way through my training that had been in the Second World War. So I am fortunate to have some damn good Marines behind me that knew what they were doing and issued the kind of orders we needed to get our butts out of there. We lost a lot of men.
I know.
A lot of men at that damn knee.
Do you have knowledge of how many Chinese were there and how many Marines were there? It's almost like a 10-to-1 ratio.
Oh, yeah, at least.
At least.
To us, it looked like even more. We
yeah.
just kept firing, and we were fortunate because later on our weapons started to freeze up on us. And we literally had to urinate on our mechanisms to keep them working. And it got, some said 30...
Did that work actually? Urinated and so that you could use the machine again?
The fluid from your body was warm enough that it would keep the mechanism working. Because your oil would freeze up. It just... and you would try to work it as much as you can, and you kept the oil in my pocket so that it would keep as warm as I possibly could keep it.
Were Chinese good?
They were better than people write about them. But some of them were not any more well-equipped than we were. We did not have the best weaponry at that time. We had a lot of stuff that still had cosmoline on it, which is what they kept to preserve the weapons in.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of valiant men out there. A lot of valiant men. On both sides.
Well, were Chinese backed by the artillery at the time?
Well, they had some artillery, yeah, at that time. Now, we didn't run into as much of it, it seemed, as we moved south when we were trying to get to Hungnam Harbor. But down to Kodori and Hagaruri, we ran into them again. They would have some, but they didn't. We were fortunate. We took control of the skies early. But if it hadn't been for that, I think the Chinese would have accomplished what they had set out to do, because they really kept them at bay. As long as the weather was clear, because that's the only time those guys could fly, because they were...
That's right.
We used to say they were all bachelors because they flew so low for close air support.
Yeah. How close were you with the Chinese? How many yards?
That television's close.
You kidding me?
Nope.
Like this?
Yes, that close.
And you were shooting
that
at
close.
them and they shooting at you?
If they could, they were trying to. And they had their burp guns. That's what we called their guns because it's the way it sounded when they fired. Mm-hmm. But that first couple nights, that's how close they were.
Are you really sure about that?
Absolutely sure about that.
Like this?
Yeah.
It's not even a 10 meters.
Not 20 of them at one time there. But you asked how close they got to me? As close as that television.
It's just about 5 meters now.
Whatever, that was close enough.
Wow.
It was close enough that we put our bayonets on.
So, as you told us, all things frozen, right? So where were you? Were you in the trench, and how did you sleep, and what did you eat? Were you able to sleep, actually?
Well, you were exhausted. You didn't sleep because you just felt like going in to go to bed. You slept because you were exhausted. You just couldn't stay awake. But they had that same problem. But they had more comfortable quarters, we imagined, to go back to. We had tents, what you had left of them. And that's what we were living off of. The ground was tough enough. Now, if you could get through the first couple of layers of ice, you could get to the ground. It was still frozen, but you could get through it with your trench tool. And we would just dig out a hovel that was maybe a foot and a half deep. That would be in a deep one. The rest of the time, you laid on the ground. You did most of your firing from the prone position.
By the way, what was your unit? 1st Marine Division, right?
1st Marine Division.
And?
Fox Company.
And what is the regiment and so on?
5th Regiment.
5th. Battalion? Battalion. What
2nd Battalion.
And you were a rifleman, right? Your
Yep.
specialty. So you began to withdraw from Udamni to Godori on when?
Well, I'm going to say it was probably the 1st of December.
And tell me about Godori experience, because I know what happened in Godori, but please tell me, what did it happen there?
What happened at Coterie?
Yep.
Well, we had lost so many men that we joined up with the Fox Company of the 7th Regiment. We joined them on our way back to Coterie, to Hagaruri. Those guys had been through it too. They got caught almost like us out in the open. And they were supposed to be taking the top of the hill. And I know from talking to some of them about how rugged that terrain was. Now, we were on flatter terrain up at Udamni because we were closer to the reservoir as well.
Sure.
And we didn't have the mountain fighting that they had to put up with. They lost a lot of troops. We didn't even have a half a regiment putting the 2 regiments together. That's how many people we had lost. And that was a tough time.
Do you know anything about Star of Godori story?
The story.
Stars in the sky. Because the weather was really cloudy there and cold, snowing, and so that the U.S. forces couldn't get the supply to you guys because they were not able to drop those because they were not able to make a flight, and the bridge was destroyed, and you need to have those bridge, and they wanted to drop the portion of the bridges so that they can assemble it over there. Weather did not allow it. And finally, that was cleared at the night in Kodori, and they began to see the stars shining in the sky. That's what I've been getting from many other chosen few. Are you aware of that? Kodori star.
I didn't hear so much about the stars. I did hear stories about how they were going to drop sections of the bridge to put over the chasms to get across.
Tell me about it. Did you see anything, or
no? I didn't see that. As I said, I joined up with the 7th Marines, Fox Company, with the 7th Regiment, and they were telling me about how they had heard they were going to be dropping sections of the bridges, and no one said anything to me about the stars coming out one night. They just, listen, I got to tell you, it was so cold, and we were all hurting. We had lost friends. I hardly knew anybody in my squad, let alone people in my regiment and in my platoon before we got hit. I'd only been up there for Thanksgiving, and in 4 days you don't get to meet a lot of other people when you're on the move. And then we got to Udamni, and all we heard in our own platoon, and that's where most of my information came from, was my platoon leader, and they were just saying, hey, guys were supposed to be home for Christmas. and rumors fly in the service. You can start a rumor in New York, and it'd be in Korea in less than 24 hours. So we were only going on the information they were giving to me, a grunt. And I was getting it from my platoon leader or the sergeants. That's where all my information was coming from. I wasn't called in on too many top-level meetings.
What was your rank at the time? PFC?
Yeah.
You didn't get that information. Just heard that you
They
were
gave him
home by Christmas. Why do you think that the 1st Marine was flanked by the Chinese from left and right there in the Jiangjin Reservoir?
Everything that I have heard since then and read since then said that they wanted to wipe out the 1st Marine Division. That was they felt that we were supposed to be their elite fighting force, so he sent down what he thought was an elite fighting force to fight us.
But why didn't we know about that intelligence? The Chinese intervened, they crossed the Yalu River, and they were heading both west and east. You were flanked.
Yes, the reason we didn't, they knew it, but there was a story about a particular Army officer who was given this information and didn't believe it.
Yep.
There was a general, I'll use his name because I don't know for sure.
General Willoughby. General Willoughby, he was in charge of intelligence.
Yes, and he passed. Now, his claim later was that he passed it on to General Almond, who was MacArthur's right-hand man.
Yes.
Do you know, people don't know that MacArthur never spent a night in Korea.
Yep.
Never spent a night. He was so believing in himself in Japan and the high regard he was held in Japan.
Emperor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he loved it, and he didn't want to be in Korea.
So there was a U.S. Army too with you, right? 10th Corps.
No, not to me.
Not to me, but with the Marines
We
at
had
the time.
the closest, other than Marines to me, were the British Black Watch, and they were on our right.
British Black Watch? Mm-hmm. How many?
Oh, I have no idea how many were there, but
What about Katusa?
I met a couple of people at times, but
What about Katusa, the Korean arguments to the U.S. Army? Korean soldiers.
right, the rocks.
Yeah, rocks. They were there with you?
No. See, most of the time the rocks fought with the Army. We would get personnel from the Rock Army that might represent them, but I never ran into, for an example, I never saw a full squad of Rock troops while I was there.
But there were Katusas there in the Chosen Few battle.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But they were on the eastern side more than the western side.
Right.
The western side was primarily Marines.
Mm-hmm. So in Kodori, were there any, again, the battle?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about it.
We
Tell me.
fought from there all the way through Hagaru. We never stopped for 17 days till we got to Hungnam.
So it took 17 days to
Right.
get to the Hungnam.
Yep.
And all the way down, you were always engaged in battle.
Yeah, I'd say the last 2 days were probably the only 2 days that wasn't happening.
How can you describe that you now in one piece? You survived it. How do you think it was possible? You saw so many people being killed there, right? And frozen to death.
Yep.
Tell me, please. How?
I think that sometimes the hand of God, if there is one, whatever fortune lands on some of us, that there's always some of us who make it through. And we can just be thankful. I can remember seeing them literally picked up, the bodies being picked up and stacked like wood on the back of a pickup. Not a, the 2.5 ton trucks that we had.
Yeah.
And they literally took the sides, the canvas off because they wanted to be able to lay more people on there, and in their frozen condition, they couldn't, because we didn't want to leave anyone behind. We did, I imagine, somewhere along that line coming back, but we tried not to, and they were stacked like firewood.
So you carry all the corpse, dead bodies,
All that we could.
to Hungnam, and then you carried.
Well, some of them they were able to build and dig open pits, and we would put the bodies.
And that's what DPAA is still trying to do. Defense POWMIA accounting agency, which is headquartered in Honolulu, Hawaii, they're trying to excavate the remains and identify them and deliver it finally to their families so that they can put a closure on it.
Yeah, we tried to do individual graves for our men, but there were times we just couldn't get through it. I mean, they said the average temperature was 36. We know.
36 Fahrenheit minus?
Minus.
Minus, yeah, you have to
We
say
know it
that.
hit 52 below zero.
What is it like to experience minus 52 Fahrenheit? Can you give us an example how cold that was? Like you urinating and it just froze into ice, something like that.
Well,
Is it too exaggeration?
no, that's not, that probably wouldn't be an exaggeration. It never happened to me, but I can remember not even being able to pull back on my bolt on my weapon because everything had frozen.
I'm sorry, what?
The bolt on the weapon, my rifle,
yeah.
I couldn't even move it. Everything was frozen.
So you were not even able
I-
to shoot.
No, not if we had been hit then. I'd have had to, I don't know what I would have done. But I had the rifle over my shoulder, and I learned after that to keep it underneath my poncho and close to my arm. Weapons became available because men lost them. It wasn't going to do them any good, so you'd take it with you, as many as you could get, because until they could get through, we weren't getting the ammunition we needed either. We were all afraid of running out of ammo, especially on the machine guns and the heavy machine guns.
Did you get enough ammunition and supplies?
There were times that we were worried about it because they couldn't get through to us. But when it cleared up and they dropped, that's the first thing we wanted was the ammo. We wanted that even more than anything because you're not going to make it with it. Because we never knew when they were going to attack again. We wouldn't get it during the day, but we'd get it every night. So you were concerned that you had enough with you. And the way it had been in the beginning wasn't as bad later on. They didn't have as many men to make the kind of wholesale charge that they had been making in the beginning. They got less and less. And then you started to run into what we call harassment fire. Small groups that might attack. When I say small groups, I'm talking about you might be outnumbered 2 or 3 to 1 instead of back to the large majority. And sometimes it'd be almost a fair fight, and as far as they seemed to have as many troops as we did. And then it became one of ambush. You tried to get to a spot where you thought they would be because that would have been a good ambush spot. So you try to get there first. I know later on, because the war went on for quite a while longer. They established the 38th parallel, and then it was a push and shove back and forth before that parallel was established, trying to get as much ground as we could occupy, and they were doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Did you get frostbite?
I got touches of it, but nothing where I lost a limb or anything. Some men lost their legs, some lost their feet, their fingers.
You are lucky.
I was very lucky, and plus I was taught a lot. I had a sergeant, gruff old thing, can't even remember his name right now. And he taught me this kind of trick and other places to put your hands to try to keep them as warm as possible, keep them so they were nimble.
Mm-hmm. So finally you got to the Hungnam Hover, right?
Right.
Yeah, tell me about it. There were many Korean refugees, right?
And we took quite a few people aboard ship, quite a few. I don't know how many it totaled out to be, but we all joked about, we're going to save a lot of people so they can drown at sea, including ourselves.
But weren't there any North Korean spies mixed with the refugees so that you had to take them out?
I don't doubt it, but again, my rank didn't give me enough privilege for me to know what was going on.
But you didn't encounter any...
I didn't, no. And I never saw or heard of any problems aboard the ship.
Oh, really? Because there was, the leaders didn't accept the recommendation from the field officers that we need to take these Korean refugees because they were afraid and they...
I don't know. We all thought that. We all thought there's guys hiding among these people that are from the other side. There was no doubt in our mind about that. We were all, just like the fellas ran into in Vietnam and all. You never knew who your friend was.
Right.
Because even on the battle, of the guys I talked to, even those that had been at Busan, at Incheon landing and so on, they said that was the thing that concerns them the most. They never knew who was on their side. And the guys in Nam went through the same thing.
But because the decision that they decided to take those refugees with U.S. soldiers, so many people saved from there. And it's more like a miracle that described in Korea right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I can believe that.
Yep. So from Hungnam, where did you go? How did you go?
Well, we went by transport then.
Transport by what? Ship or?
Yes, by ship.
To?
They took us down to Busan, and then now I went across to a place called Camp Fisher in Japan, outside of Kyoto, outside Kobe.
What do you mean?
It was a camp there called Camp Fisher.
Yeah.
And I went there for 2 weeks.
Why?
They gave me leave.
You mean R&R?
Yep.
From Busan?
From Busan.
Yeah. So, and then you came back?
Yeah.
And so where did you go?
I joined my outfit, which was back to Fox Company, and we went up north to, don't even know, we were just out there. And we would
East or west?
West.
West.
But we would go on patrols.
Near to Imjin River?
Dad.
Does that ring the bell?
Yeah. Yeah, the Imjin River rings a bell.
Yeah. And what about Iron Triangle? Geumhwa?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Cheolwon, Old Baldy?
We were never in, I was never again in what I'll call a large village. Mm-hmm. There were small villages around us.
Yep.
But we were in a location to where we spent most of our time going on combat patrols. Again, where you would try to go out seeking higher land. There was a place called Ongak.
Ongak?
That was a hill.
Ungak?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
hill number 1. what number what? There's a
Now,
number.
see, some of them did have numbers, others didn't. Like there was 219 and 213, and then there were 3 hills that we named after movie stars.
Okay.
We named them. I have no idea what they really were.
Yeah.
We had Jane Russell, Marilyn Monroe,
Of
And
course.
and they were like 2 of the hills. You can imagine.
Was it White Horse?
Pardon?
White Horse?
That's familiar.
Yeah.
You got to remember, it was 71 years ago,
I know.
and I didn't always know the name of. All I knew was I was still in Korea, and I was still fighting Chinese and Korean troops.
Yep.
And our job was to go out on a patrol till we made contact. My outfit. We were called Unit 33 at the time. It was the beginning of Force Recon. And we would go out until we made contact
Contact with what?
with
Enemy?
the enemy.
So, and then what was
Well,
your mission? Contact them and then let the forces know about the coordination or what?
No, our job was to take them out. As long as they were within reason as far as the size of the group. There were only like 10 of us on a patrol. We wouldn't take on a platoon. If we caught another patrol from the other side out, then our job was to eliminate them.
Did you?
Yep.
How many? Can you count?
I'd say at least 4 or 5 different platoons or different patrols that we ran into. The job was to get to the place where we wanted to be first and set up. And the other times, that was their same job. We used to get there first.
Feel like I'm watching a movie now here. How dangerous was it?
Dangerous as it's either you or me.
You were wounded ever?
Yes.
Tell me about it. How did it happen? Where was it?
I got hit with what they call a satchel charge. I didn't get hit directly with it, but it threw me probably as far as that door. Mm-hmm. And that's all I remember. And then it took me to the hospital ship.
In Incheon?
At Incheon Harbor. Yeah.
Yeah. What is the name of the ship?
USS Hope.
Yes. How long were you there?
10 days. And then I got more R&R.
And R&R, yes, to Japan.
Yep.
And then you came back again
Yep.
and go back to your...
Back to my unit. That's where I wanted to be. That's where I felt safe.
You are kidding me.
No.
R&R is more safe.
Well, yeah, but you don't get that for a long time.
When did you leave Korea?
In June of 52.
Okay, so have you been back to Korea since then?
No.
You've never been back to Korea?
No.
Oh, you need to go. You are still young. You know, Korean government has a revisit program they're running. You know that, right?
No.
You didn't know? They give you 7 days tour of Korea, including DMZ and Panmunjom area, joint security
Panmunjom
area.
I'm familiar with.
Yeah, and you're going to love it. But are you following up with the Korean development? How Korean economy is doing now? And
Oh, I read about it.
tell me, what do you know?
Well, all I do know is that it's probably one of the most successful countries after a major war ever, and how fast they were able to recover. I mean, I know what you saw compared to what I saw. When I left, all I could remember were rice paddies, frozen ground, and not good memories.
Not good memory, yes.
Not at all.
Not at all. What did you see actually in Korea when you were there? How was it overall? How about the Korean people? How do they live? What do they eat? Things like that.
They didn't have much of anything, Doctor. They were as bad as any country that I can imagine had to appear after a war. Regardless of what the German people went through or the Japanese people went through, it couldn't have been any worse for those people. You know, it's always the middle class group of people in any country that really suffers the most. The ones that were bad off are still bad off, but the ones that at some point thought they had success and lose it, and they were just middle class people, doctors, attorneys, construction people. They didn't have that. It was all gone by both sides. War is devastating. War is the worst experience you can possibly have.
So when you left Korea in June of 1952, did you ever imagine that Korea would become like this today?
Not when I left, but when I saw how the recovery was going in some of the other countries, I knew we'd be there till it was built back. First of all, when we left, we hadn't won a war. It was still a truce. And my feeling was the same as it had been. If they start to prosper in the South, but they don't in the North, it's going to start again. And 71 years later, I still think it'll start again.
Do you know the rank of Korean economy in the world right now?
I'm going to say it's third or fourth.
Not that big.
No, I don't mean total. I mean in comparison, standard of living and education and voting privileges for all and so on. I think they're a lot further ahead than some of the other countries.
Largest economy in the world is now China, U.S.,
right,
and Germany and Japan and so on. Korea, South Korea is ranked number 10.
Right, but their standard of living is not number 10.
Right.
You can have the Chinese government touting itself right now about how they're the number 1 or 2 economies in the world, but not for all their people.
Oh, yeah.
In Korea, you got it for all the people.
Yes. So that's how Korea has been really accomplishing one of the most rapid and miraculous economic development after you left, and then U.S. continued to aid Korea, and that's how South Korea become global economic power and 6th, 7th largest trading partner to the United States and the biggest ally in East Asia for the United States when China is challenging now the America everywhere in South China Sea and so on.
In my opinion, China's biggest problem is China. It's afraid of everybody. It's afraid of losing what it has instead of its hope for gain should be greater than its fear for loss.
You are very correct. That's the problem. China's problem is China itself, because so many people has not the beneficiary of those they call fast economic development.
And they could be.
Yeah.
They could copy South Korea, and they'd be where South Korea is today in 10 years.
So what do you think about the whole thing? You didn't know much about Korea when you were in the school, in high school, when you're growing up. Now you know, you've been there, even though you've not been back to Korea after you left Korea, but you know what's going on. What do you think about this whole transformation
of
Korea?
Oh, I think it's been remarkable. It's been second to no other country. No other country that I can think of has recovered as quickly as Korea has from the devastation. I know what it looked like when I left, from my perspective of just a common man walking down the streets. Well, they didn't even have streets. But walking through the areas, I can't believe that country recovered the way it did.
So do you regret, you were almost like in a hell in Udamli, Godori, Hagar-uri, and then Hungnam. You were injured back and forth in that White Horse Mountain area. You were engaged in a series of battles almost every day. Did you ever regret your service in Korea?
I regret losing as many men as we did. We all regret that. But no, I don't regret what I learned. I regret that I had to learn it that way.
Are you proud to be a Korean War veteran?
Yes, you bet.
Do you have any special message to the Korean people in the context of 70th anniversary, but still they are at war technically?
Stay true to your beliefs. Stay true to your people. And stay true as friends of the U.S.
What would you say to the American young students who doesn't know about these things? What would you say to them? And about your Korean War veterans experience?
I hope you never have to go through what we went through. But if you don't stay true to our nation's beliefs and our nation's creed, you're going to wind up the same way all the other countries have wound up. They gave up on democracy.
Any other episode that you want to leave to this interview, especially in Udamli, Hagal-uri, Godori, and Hungnam?
Any, what, doctor?
Episode. Something happened to you and you still being bothered by that.
Not really. I've come to peace with it.
Wasn't it hard?
Yes.
Did you have some sort of PTSD out of it?
No.
No, not at all.
I'm not going to blame it on a PTSD. Did I have some difficult times? Yeah. When I would think about it, and there are times I wonder how I made it through. A lot of us made it through. We don't know why wasn't us still over there? It just, thank God.
What is the legacy of the first Marine in the Korean War?
That it is the forgotten war.
Huh.
It is the forgotten war.
What do you think about that? Why is it forgotten? As you mentioned, Korea was the most successful out of U.S. engagement after World War II, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And why?
Because it ended in a tie. Because in most of the others, we've lost. We pulled out of Afghanistan. We pulled out of Vietnam. Should we have been in either one of those? That's somebody else's argument. But we didn't stay and get the mission accomplished.
Right? And still forgotten. They don't talk about it. History textbook only cover about one paragraph, and it's all about MacArthur, that U.S. Marines hate.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we know from the history books, the real history books, not the ones written by MacArthur and his men. When he said, I shall return, he forgot to tell you there'd be 2 million troops in front of him. He was no Wainwright.
And that's why we are doing this, because the children, students in our classroom will hear from you about the Changjin Reservoir Battle, one of the 3 biggest battles in the history of U.S. Marine Corps, right? And directly from you, so that they can learn about it and dig more about it. You know, this is how I think we can attract the young students into the history and learning from the history. That's why we are doing this. So if you don't have any more episode or any other stories to tell, I want to wrap this interview, but it's my great honor to meet you, sir. You are one of those chosen few. And actually, Korean government donated $300,000 to the Marine Corps Museum in Quantico so that you have a Jangjin Reservoir Battle Monument there. We put that chosen few in parentheses because chosen few is Japanese pronunciation of Jangjin in Chinese character. And Korean government cannot make a donation of tax money to make it as a chosen few, the Japanese. So because we have such bad history with Japan, and Japan still do not acknowledge what they did to many, many Asian people during the Pacific War. So that's what happened. But we never forget, okay? And we want to have a history lesson from it. But I want to thank you for your honorable service. Semper Fi.
Semper Fi. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.